I would call this the best day ever, the beginning of the best day ever. It wasn't easy to get into the schools, especially because when we wanted to go, there would be students at the school. We had to get it passed by a superintendent of schools to get permission to go in and film. When we pulled up to Angus Elementary School, it was a real wonderful moment for me. It was like all the memories came flooding back, all the work we did together. They were the first school to put together the Stewart Family Literacy Award, and they scheduled to give it out to a student, but what happened was a different school in Coldwater had their date just before Angus Morrison's date to give it to students. So that's when Mitchell received the award in Coldwater. This morning that we went to film, Mitchell was able to actually come along with us. And so I wanted to introduce Mitchell to these teachers. I didn't know what would happen. I didn't know what we were going to talk about, but I just knew every time the team got together, it was kind of this chemistry, this magic that happened. It was Gina Brown, who is the teacher librarian of the school, John Alexander, who's the grade 8 teacher, Carrie Fitzhenry, who is the grade 7-8 teacher, and myself. So the four of us actually sat together in the library talking about literacy, and it was really a special moment. We talked for a little while, and then I said, I want to introduce you to Mitchell. So Mitchell comes into the frame and he sits with us at the table. It wasn't scripted. It was just, whatever happens, happens. And I'll tell you what, he was brilliant. He talked about growing up and what kind of a learner he was. It turns out he had Irlen syndrome, so he had, the shaded glasses. He also had tools that helped him to read, like Dragon, and he talked about another tool. I can't remember what he said now, but we asked him, what was your favorite book? Did you read any book? Did you like anything? And his favorite book turned out to be Hugo Cabret, which we all cheered. It was like this amazing moment. We're like, yay, Hugo Cabret. That was a book that we used to walk around with and call the secret book. And if you haven't read Hugo Cabret, or you have a child who struggles with literacy, get them this book. It's the secret book. And I'm not going to tell you more about it, just that it really gives students confidence. So get that book. It's amazing. Anyway, I'll leave the rest to your imagination. This documentary is going to be so genuine and so touching. I can't wait for you to see Mitchell's interview and how it went with the teachers sitting around that table. It was amazing. We have to go to Minette's Point. I wanted to go back there because, first of all, I used to live very close to that waterfront park. I knew there wouldn't be a lot of people there. And it was also the place where Arnie and I used to hang out between presentations. We'd sit on this picnic table. We would just talk about our dreams and the future and what we had noticed in schools. It was always just the best place for us. So I wanted to go back to Minette's Point. Anyway, so I get out of the car at Minette's Point, and everybody's getting ready, and I look down at the ground and I notice that there are feathers everywhere. We used to talk about feathers and how feathers represented hope, and feathers made up a wing, bird's wings, and together with all our stories together, we could fly. So these feathers were really symbolic to me. I started picking them up. I made a heart on the beach and put the feathers down on the heart. It was just really lovely. And then I noticed our bench. So I went over and I hopped up on the picnic table, and I'm sitting there, and Mitchell came over and sat, and that is the very iconic photo that we got together. Arnie and I used to sit there, and then we had the photo of Mitchell and I sitting there, and it's really treasured. It's a treasured photograph that I'll always have because it represents that ripple effect of our lives. It's an iconic photo. Next, I drove over to my old house. It's a log home, that is made of cedar wood. It's like a gigantic hug, and I think it's the most beautiful little house. And I saw all the trees we planted, and they were really, really tall. I talked with my favorite neighbor, Tanya Beatty, and it was a lovely moment of reminiscing. When I got back to the Airbnb, Mitchell and his family were there, and everyone else. Everybody was pinning on their Arnie pins and getting ready for the presentation, the celebration of life. Sylvia asked me to put together a little agenda of who's going to be speaking and what's going to happen. And then we got in our car and we went over there. As I'm pulling up to the Spirit Catcher, the clouds parted and it became this beautiful blue sky. It was amazing. And when I walked up the steps to the Spirit Catcher, it was you're just pinching yourself, like, is this a real thing happening? It was gorgeous. Dale arrived with the family, which was a bit of a surprise to me. I didn't know that the whole family was also going to come to the celebration of life. It was so good to see them. Dale had a present for me. I guess during that day they'd gone to the mall, and he slipped away and bought me a pair of beautiful black gloves that had gray buttons on them. They're so beautiful. And he said, "This will keep your hands warm tonight." And I'll always keep those. They were really, really special to me. Anyway, I gave Dale a bell, and I wrapped the bell with my red scarf that everybody always sees me dancing with here in Safety Harbor. I brought that scarf with me, and I gave him the bell. And I said, at the right moment, I want you to stand up and ring that bell, because we're going to give Arnie his wings tonight. Anyway, I'll leave the rest to you to imagine. It was beautiful. Arnie even kind of showed up in different forms that night. The sky turned pink, and it was beautiful. And I was so happy. I started waving that red scarf and just doing this spirited dance up there, just out of happiness, joy, relief, excitement. It was like a moment where I'm like totally living in that moment. I turned to Kathleen Corrigan, who was standing next to me, and she says, "You did it, Janet Lee." And she had tears in her eyes, and I looked at her and I said, "No, Kathleen, you did it." And she looked back, she said, "No, you did it." And then I looked at Fitzy, who was up there too, and I said, "You did it." And she goes, "No, you." And then everybody was turning back and back and back saying, "You did it, you did it." We all did it. We did it. We filmed it. We had it happen. We celebrated Arnie. We got the word out about literacy. We're going to make a difference in the world. And we all knew it. It was just that moment where we knew it. The cherry on the top that night was afterwards. We went to a restaurant. We all raised a glass and we were so happy to be together. And at one moment I noticed that Dale kind of slipped away from the table. And I'm looking and I noticed that he's walking around giving out Arnie cards to complete strangers. He was so proud of his brother. So I can't wait for you to see this in the movie. It's way better than I ever imagined it. Can you believe that some things you put on your vision boards can turn out to be way better than you think? So I would suggest you always put a line on your vision board that says, "I would like all of these things or something better." Because sometimes something better actually happens.